Prepare for the return of the Alternative View Conference, AV5. Humanity versus Insanity, a conference that will make a difference. Featuring the most challenging and thought-provoking speakers from across the globe. May the 16th to the 18th, 2014. Staverton Park Hotel, Daventry, Northamptonshire. AV5, the Alternative View.
My expertise is actually in something called functional medicine, which is really natural medicine, but it's a kind of flash word they've kind of given it now. I can't see any of these. Okay, all right. So, and we work, alternative medicine is a quite broad term, but functional medicine. What do? We deal with people who are ill, people who have infections, have heart problems, blah, blah, blah. And we try to resolve those things without using drugs. I have a pretty heavy background in something called molecular biology. And to the layperson, that's DNA, yeah, genetics. I did that at King's College London. And I teach doctors as a therapist, and I'm also an expert with this, as you heard. So when someone gets in trouble, like an alternative therapist, I've got to go and kind of bail them out. So that's kind of me. Now, I was saying to Ian earlier when we were having lunch, I kind of want to go off and really tell you some amazing, wonderful stuff and come off topic. But really, I have to be disciplined because we have a problem, and which is I'm going to start to describe to you as we go through, about antibiotic resistance. And it's a major problem that people just aren't aware to, really. I knew about this 20 years ago in the labs at King's College when I was working as what we call a DNA junkie. We were working on DNA and all the rest of it, and no one really had a great interest in it then, and you couldn't really raise an eyebrow about it. But now people start to hear this more on the news about antibiotic resistance. Yeah, you start, no one hearing about it? Yes. Okay. SARS. Yeah, stuff like this. Okay, so this is the metro. Oh, it's interesting. You can't see anything, so you need to be seeing slides. Yes. Ah, there you go. It's the metro. I'm just going to tell you half a story here. I want you to imagine something. I want you to imagine it's you had a lovely day and it's a Sunday, you're rested, you're sitting on your sofa at home, you have a nice cup of tea, and then you get a phone call. It's about 11:30 at night. And on the end of that phone call is your best friend's dad. And my best friend's name was Mike. And I heard this. I didn't hear, hello Graham, how are you, whatever. It's a bit odd he was calling that late at night. He turned around and said, Mike's dying. And that's all I heard, and I thought, well, you know, I was a bit shocked at first, and this is a joke. Obviously, by the tone of his voice, it wasn't a joke. Now, to give you a bit of background, Mike is a 6'4", strapping East End guy, fit as they come. And he was living in Indonesia then, and for 2 weeks, unbeknownst to us, he'd been laying on the floor, dying from some horrible disease. And the medics hadn't been able to help him. I don't quite know why, there's some great hospitals there. Not been able to help him, nothing was working. And so hence I got the call, because I knew something about this kind of stuff. So I sat there and I literally had about 30 minutes to an hour to try and work something out. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to imagine that you get that phone call. Because if we don't take care of what I'm going to show you now, I can absolutely guarantee you in about 10 years' time, you're going to be getting phone calls like that. Or people are going to be saying to you, aunt, whoever, your sister, whoever, whatever the name, fill in the name, is in hospital and she's dying, there's nothing they can do. Currently, as we stand here, I stand here and you sit there, there's probably about 1,000 people a week across America and Europe who are dying from basic infections because the bugs just aren't working. All right, so this is real serious stuff. And I kind of make no apologies, I'm going to show you loads of data. Okay, I'm going to try and make it as interesting as possible, because I really want you to be convinced about this and understand this properly. All right? So this appeared in the Metro, I don't know, a year ago-ish or whatever. This is what you get on the tube in London, if you live in London. And quite an astonishing statement, or title. And it's from this woman here, who is, anyone recognise this woman? Yeah, Chief Medical Officer. I think she's a haematologist. She's a physician. And it's really hard to read her. So she's basically saying, look, the world is facing an apocalyptic threat from resistant superbugs. It's more serious than global warming. Well, most people know that. Well, you guys are more experts than me at geophysics and stuff. That's obviously not what it was meant to be. So she's our top health official. Now, she said this. And it goes on to explain about things like gonorrhea. I mean, way past in the history that used to be true. That's now becoming very dangerous again. There's only one effective antibiotic left for that, as she explains. And there are a few new treatments on the horizon. And the situation is so grave it should be considered a civil emergency. Now, she told the Commons Committee that. And that should have been on every news show. You should be well aware of that. She's a professor, and she says, it's clear that we might not ever see global warming. But the apocalyptic scenario is that when I need a new hip in 20 years, I'll die from a routine infection because we've run out of antibiotics. Now, she's saying 20 years. The research I looked at is probably going to be 10 years. Now, this is a little book that she wrote. Now, I was in Bishop Stortford. Anyone know Bishop Stortford? Yeah. Right, it was a rainy day. I had all my kids with me, and we had enough water around, so we dived into a bookshop. They went off to the children's section, and I sort of wandered around the health section as I do, and I saw this. I couldn't believe it, because I saw the title. I thought, my God, someone's writing about this. Then I saw who wrote it, and I was stunned to see that a medic had written this, because normally not a lot of mention is made of this. Now, what really, the word global threat worries me, because that's that kind of standard thing you hear of all this nonsense these days. And this was the introduction. Now, bear in mind, whilst we're going to quickly read this, that this is the Chief Medical Officer of this country, right? This isn't just someone down the pub, no disrespect to someone down the pub, or your mate telling you, this is someone of standing, okay? And this is a story, this is how the book opened. Now, I'm in this bookshop reading this, and my jaw's on the floor, because she's written it. It's a dark July day. Mrs. Zoo, I don't know why they call her Mrs. Zoo, it wasn't Mrs. Smith, has not been counting, but it's the 15th day of her isolation. It started with a wheeze a week after her son's birthday. She hadn't taken Joss to the theme park. She had taken Joss to the theme park with a couple of his school friends. She keeps on going back to the day in her mind. It was full of energy and laughter. The wheeze turned into a cough, the cough into a sore throat. Her husband John gave her that look. Concerned but distant, scared of what was coming. He knew. It had happened to one of his colleagues at work. He was already thinking about what it would mean. How would he look after Josh? Would he cope? And when Josh was born 16 years ago, the crisis was beginning to take hold. Now, she's saying this story in the future. In the final months of her pregnancy, Mrs. Zoo was advised to stay indoors, to separate herself from her friends and family. And when Josh went to nursery, she and John were lectured by their head about how irresponsible it was to send a child into public with even mild symptoms. They would give a home testing kit. Josh had to spit onto a strip of paper. If it turned green, he could attend. If it was red, he must stay at home. They call it the red spot test. John's mum likened it to a pregnancy test. And a few years later, shortly after Josh joined primary school, the government passed new laws, making it a criminal offence to be infected in public. There were talks of random tests in the street, and if you were contagious, you would be committed to one of the isolation sanatoriums that were being built on the edge of all major towns. This was a death penalty. They were referred to as the colonies. Now, if you're not worried by reading that, then you must be asleep. Because that's the Chief Medical Officer predicting what's going to happen. Now, two things stand out to me there. They passed new laws making it a criminal offence to be infected in public. How difficult is it to come up to say to someone and say, you look infected? How difficult is that? All right. There were talk of random tests in the street. They don't like you. Okay. I'm not a geopolitical expert. There's people here that can look at this and their brains will start spinning around. Okay. My brain span around in this bookshop to even seeing this. And if you were contagious, you would be committed to one of the isolation sanatoriums. This is the Chief Medical Officer writing this. She must have been. There's no way she can put this out without being sanctioned. Okay. Now, does that not worry you when you see that in print? It worried me. And the family saw me looking comatose with a white face, pale as they can be when I saw this. And she goes on to say, as a Chief Medical Officer, I'm the UK government's most senior advisor on health issues. The role dates back to 1855, and I'm the 16th holder of that post. And she's very proud of herself because she's the first woman to hold that post. That's fair enough. Now, she decided in 2012 to focus on infectious diseases, to bring a report out. I think it's not controversial, there's no problem. And she goes on to say how wrong she was. And what she learned when she started to look into this subject really scared her. It scared her not just as a doctor, but as a mother, a wife, and a friend. And she then goes on to say that she then formed a group of people to try and look into this. And what she said was, we're losing the battle against infectious diseases, bacteria are fighting back and becoming resistant to modern medicine, and in short, the drugs don't work. Well, they've not worked for a long time. So let me just highlight. What I learned scared me, not just as a doctor, but as a mother, a wife, and a friend. And keep remembering, she's the chief medical officer saying this. We're losing the battle. We've actually lost the battle. Okay, we're so close to this, you've no idea. The bacteria have definitely, they've always been fighting back. They can turn over a whole new generation in 20 minutes. It takes us how many years? In short, the drugs don't work. Now, most people assume that the issue of resistance will be resolved. Who's in their mind to, oh, they'll sort it out? Put it in your hand who thinks they will have sorted it out. Most people, I mean, don't be embarrassed, most people think they're going to do something, yeah? Now, not so. Booner's research. Now, Booner is an incredible herbal medical doctor. Brilliant guy, really, really good guy. I really wanted to talk about him today, but there's no time. But he's written 2 fantastic books, how to treat bacterial problems and viral problems. He's a very astute guy. Now, his research shows that virtually no new antibiotics are in development from Big Pharma. Effectively, it's given up. Okay? And as natural therapists know, that's chiropractors, osteopaths, nutritionists, blah, blah, blah. Few conditions are really cured by drugs. I think most people here might know that. They're actually just to artificially change the condition of the body rather than heal them. And so drugs are often taken for decades, becoming a perpetual source of income for the big pharma companies. Most people know that here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't need to convince you that. Now, antibiotics, on the other hand, they work too well. They're a short course, it eradicates the infection, and the patient is cured. So investment has fallen by 75% between years 83 and 2008 because it's more profitable for the drug companies to focus on medications for chronic conditions. Now, Brett Sperberg, who's a research is associated, found only 5 to 7 new antibiotics close to market, and they're just really altered versions of the ones we've got already. And even the big biotech companies, they only had 1. And he said, Bruno, he's an astute guy, he said, I had no idea that the pharmaceutical giants had taken this path. Based on information from the leading experts, complete bacterial resistance to antibiotic drugs is inevitable in a decade or less. That's 10 years or less. So that means when you go down to the doctor and you've got an ear infection, or you take your son, they may not work anymore. And that also means there's a significant risk that your son or you may die from that infection. Okay? And this is no joke. Just put that up again for you. Have a look at that, a decade or less. Who wants to be alive in 10 years? Yeah? Don't plan on getting an infection. Are you starting to see this? Are you starting to see London, crowds of people? How's that going to happen? On trains, how's that going to happen if these infections are there? You've got very little to deal with. So the next question you're all going to ask, I really want to walk around, I have to say, is what are they doing? Is that a logical question? Yeah? What are they doing about it? That's what I ask. What are they doing about it? So they've got something called bacteriophages. Now, they receive renewed attention as possible agents against bacterial pathogens. And evidence from several recent trials designed and executed in accordance with good laboratory practice regulations indicates that this therapy can be effective, although the efficacy of the phage treatment depends greatly on the route, how you take it, and on the frequency. And numerous obstacles, unfortunately, to use of the phage antimicrobials, as antibiotics if you like, for practice remain. Among them, the issue of phage resistance and the possibility of phage-mediated transfer of undesirable genetic material to bacterial hosts. Therapy based on the simultaneous use of several phages with no genetic sequences and targeting different receptors can help overcome it. There's a little bit of a worry there. Does anyone see it? They can't really control these things. And to be fair, they were looked at in 1916, and then once again in 65, they were kind of dropped. And they were dropped for a reason. And if they are going to make these things work, we're miles away. You know, so forget that, that's not going to happen. So what's the next thing they're talking about? Bacteriocins. Now, bacteriocins really are probiotics. Everybody heard of probiotics? Yeah, everyone uses them? Now, they're very good. You use them. It's interesting, actually, because my name should have been up there with my credentials, but after Neil's talk, wish we took them off. But he's really good. How good is that guy? He's really clever. But we do use them in clinical practice. They work very well. We should be on a probiotic every day. It works incredibly well. We fix lots of problems with that. That's a whole other lecture. But they're just saying, look, class 2A bacteriocins are antagonists to many important human pathogens. These bacteriocins have the ability to target a relatively narrow range of bacteria without affecting much of the natural microbiota. That's the bugs in your gut. They're not the nice ones you want to keep. And that's an advantage, especially compared to other antibiotics, because they just kill everything. And although these things do not target as many pathogens as other antibiotics, they have a potential to perform a very specific role. The problem, once again, is that they can't do all the things that we need what the antibiotics used to do. There's a couple of ways they work. They colonise, they go into your gut and they crowd out other bad bacteria. That's great. They can kill them as well. They can also stick them between the immune system as well. That's kind of cool. Okay, so they're not bad, but they're really not. They're not going to do it. They're really not going to do what we need them to do. Another thing you're going to hear about is inhibition of virulence factors. What does that mean? Basically, when a bug invades your body, it has to attach, and it has to grow, and it has to spread. And there's various mechanisms that it wants to use to do that. So they said, look, if we can find out these mechanisms, we can kind of block them. And that's what they're trying to do with these sort of things. Look, it's recently established that this is always called the second generation of antibiotics. It holds promise, and it seeks to attenuate virulence processes, which is alter them, without actually killing everything else, which is fantastic, because then you won't tend to get resistance. There's a problem, though. They found that, it's even better, it can reduce what they call biofilms. Has anybody heard of biofilms in bacteria? Okay, and what bacteria can kind of, if they're under attack, they can kind of put a shelter over their head, if you like, a film. And it's very difficult to get to and kill them off. And then when all the drugs have gone, everything's gone, they come out again. They're very clever. So this is great, but can anyone see a problem with that? At the bottom it says you've got to use them in combination with conventional antibiotics. But they're not going to be here. And there's other problems as well. So I'm not holding my breath on that one. I was on a radio show, which is Alex G radio show. I think Alex is here. Alex, are you here? I haven't introduced you yet, but I spoke to him already. And I came off and my kids said, let's have a listen to it, Dad. So I went back on and heard the comments. And someone said, the answer is nanomeds. Nanomeds. Anyone heard of nanomeds? Okay. Anyone heard of IBM? Yes. I'm not a geopolitical person, but I take it they're not very nice. Is that correct? Okay. That's being diplomatic. Right. Well, they produce this gel, this wonderful gel. They can inject it in you and do all sorts of stuff, and it can kill loads of bacteria. It's amazing. Let's have a look at what they say about it. Now, when you've been in research, what you realise is that people big things up. And the reason they big things up is they want more money to come into research. But we don't want bigging up, we want truth. Now, we don't want people lying and making up things. I'm not suggesting they are lying and making up things, as I'm being recorded, but as a general statement. So if this nanomedicine works as broadly as the scientists hope, it could save countless lives and protect vulnerable people, such as hospital patients from illnesses that arise from bacteria. Hospitals avoid hospitals. Treat them like the plague. They are absolute breeding grounds for this stuff. Okay, do not go to hospital unless you absolutely have to go to hospital. Okay, just going to end up with it. This medicine is based on a trick from the chip manufacturing, where researchers can isolate certain kinds of cells and attack them. It sounds fantastic. I'm really happy. Too many of today's drugs and disinfectants kill off all the good cells and the bad cells and indiscriminately, but this one doesn't do it, and it's amazing. Really, really good. Now this is fantastic. This has another interesting property. It can attack whole colonies of bacteria, particularly if it's injected directly into the region of infection, and blah, 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 blah. And it can also disrupt biofilms and all the rest. This is amazing. Now look at this quote. We can kill 100% of the bacteria and reduce the likelihood of recurrence. So I'm on board with this. This sounds amazing, yeah? And then the cold, hard reason of science comes in, and someone else has a look, and it says, well, Mr. Michael Otto, who's a senior investigator at this lab, he's an expert in molecular biology and infection, and he said, well look, the significance lies first and foremost in the chemistry. Allow an efficient device coating with an antimicrobial non-toxic gel, fine. However, as an infectious disease specialist and microbiologist, I must say that the categorical problem with this is whether they work in vivo, actually in the real world. So these guys haven't even tried it in the real world yet. Previously, when they did try this stuff in the real world, it didn't work. All right, so that one statement before makes you think the saviours are here, and then someone else comes in, and it's not. Now what you're getting from this is there's nothing going on. They haven't got anything. Unless they're holding it back, they haven't got anything. Okay? So when those antibiotics are gone, there is nothing to go in their place. Before I started speaking, did anyone really have that understanding? Yeah, a few people. I mean, and the CMO, Chief Medical Officer, she said, well, 20 years. It's 10 years. So what does reducing the load mean? You've got some time now to prepare for this. Reducing the load is you need to work on yourself, okay, and you need to get yourself as clean and healthy as possible. Because when there's things in you, everyone here has got infections. I can absolutely guarantee it. We run tests all day long on people. We pick up gut infections, subclinical infections, you name it. It's parasites, viruses, all the rest of it. What you've got to do is work on getting yourself healthy and get rid of these things. Okay. Now, is anyone a bit squeamish?
Bring it up.
Oh, gosh, okay. I'm trying to run all this technology here and look at my time here as well. This is like a 4 or 5 minute thing. Okay, if you don't like it, turn away. These are certain. Okay, what's the biggest thing with infection you're asked to do with your hands? Wash your hands. How many people don't wash their hands? How many men, go to the toilet and don't wash their hands? You must wash your hands. Okay, and I'm going to attempt to run this machinery, and if I get it wrong, I'm sorry. Volume, please.
Mary Alvarez savors every minute with her kids. Playing ball and laughing. For this mom, each day with them is a gift after coming too close to death last August.
I thought I had the flu. I started feeling tired.
But within days, this soccer coach and PTA president knew it wasn't the flu.
I started feeling numbness in my left arm, blurred vision. I'm still smiling for my kids, but now I can't get out of bed.
2 trips to the ER solved nothing.
CAT scan came back normal, no problem.
But her husband, George, was scared.
She couldn't eat. She could barely walk to the bathroom. So I knew at that point, she was deteriorating really quick.
It all came to a head on the first day of school as their kids aged 9 through 17 headed back to the classroom. Their mom was in an ambulance headed to Barrow Neurological Hospital after an MRI explained those strange symptoms.
It came back. You have a brain tumor. At that exact moment where my heart fell just completely all the way down.
Dr. Nakaji was expecting to find a brain tumor. He showed me the video as he operated on Rosemary's brain, carefully working, knowing this is the most dangerous spot in the human body to work next to, the brainstem.
Here's the lung. At this point, it still looks like a brain tumor, and so we're just opening up into the inside of the...
And then, the unexpected. No tumor, instead a worm. Watch as Dr. Nakaji grabs the worm and gently tugs it out of Rosemary's brain. It's still alive. You don't hear him on the tape, but Nakaji actually chuckles.
Which I'm sure is a very strange response for the people in the operating room, but because I was so pleased to know that it wasn't going to be something terrible.
This worm comes from eating undercooked pork, but more frighteningly, it can be spread by people who have the parasite in their bodies and don't wash their hands well after using the bathroom. That is the problem.
And it only takes one person who is spreading it constantly to get a lot of people exposed, and some of those people are going to go on to develop this problem.
It's impossible to pinpoint exactly when Rosemary contracted this brain worm.
Probably she was one of these very unfortunate people who had somebody handle food for her, that she ingested it, and it got to her brain.
What is normally a rare occurrence has become much more common. Dr. Nakaji has removed 5 of them in the past few months, and other doctors at Barrow, they're seeing more of them too.
I think it could be a fluke, but it does concern me that if we see more and more cases, as one person is infected and starts to spread these, it spreads it to other people who become infected, and then they spread it. So that more people are at least at risk.
Meantime, George and Rosemary are stunned, relieved, and a bit creeped out by it all.
It could have ate holes in her brain.
Who's freaked out by that? I'm freaked out by that.
Is that tapeworm?
I didn't know what it was actually diagnosed as, but it's a worm. Whichever it is, you don't want it in your brain, that's for sure. Okay, do you want me to skip this next one?
No.
Are you sure?
Yes.
I feel really bad about showing this. I've asked you, okay, so don't kill me, okay? It's a 12-year-old girl, and she's had all the sorts of problems, the tummy problems, all the rest of it. That's her abdomen they're working on. That's the biliary tract. Goes to the gallbladder. There's more. They're alive as well. Hey, listen, I warned you, okay? I did say, do you want to see it? What people don't understand, listen, don't get me wrong, I don't expect anyone in this audience to be having that in their tummy, okay? Alright, there are statistics on it, I won't give them to you in case you freak out. Signs and symptoms of these things are itchy bum. Has anybody got an itchy bum? We're all doing this. Itchy bum. Okay. It's a bit of a shock and awe thing. Washing your hands is so important. We've got to go back to basics. Hygiene, basic hygiene. Clean yourself, wash your hands, make sure food is cooked properly and all the rest of it. We're all chronically infected with bacteria, there's stacks of them. Mycoplasmas I'll talk in a minute, they're quite interesting. There's lots of viral stuff in us, there's lots of fungi, and candida and parasites. And part of what I do, my expertise, is dealing with these things which are causing problems in the patient. I'd like to show you some of that stuff today, but unfortunately there's too much else to delve into, so I can't do it. They all weaken you. So if you're down the line, you get infection because you're weak, okay? Because your immune system can't deal with it. And when it's overloaded, so this stuff all has to be dealt with. And it starts with basic stuff like washing your hands and eating properly. Now they can express themselves in complex ways that elude modern medicine. Allopathic is what we call modern doctors' medicine. And they result in misdiagnosis and inappropriate treatment. Okay? Let's give you an example of one of these things. HHV6, okay, which is a herpes virus. Now, there's a bit of technical stuff there, but let's just keep it simple. Human herpes virus 6 is a set of two closely related herpes viruses known as HHV6A and blah, blah, blah. And they infect nearly all human beings, typically before the age of 2. How many of you knew that you were infected with this before the age of 2? Okay, of course you didn't. Okay, yeah, come here together. Right. And they result in lots of stuff, diarrhea, childhood fever, and lots of really complex medical names and all the rest of it. And they can also lead on to very, very horrible things like encephalitis, intractable seizures. And like other herpes virus, like Epstein-Barr virus, EBV, which your GP checks for, and other ones, they establish what's called a lifelong latency. They're with you forever. Okay, and they become reactivated in later life as you get older. And this can be associated with many clinical manifestations. Okay, now, it can occur in pretty much anywhere in the body. You can see there's a list of them there. And they can cause problems in the body. So you think you've got something, and you haven't. You've actually got this thing hiding in there causing reactivation. They can even cause cognitive dysfunction, permanent disability, and death. All right? Now, everyone in this room has got that. All right? That's one thing. Now, the problems with these chronically infected illnesses, they're not well taught at medicine. It's functional medicine doctors that are taught to deal with this, not the standard medical doctor. And patients remain ill for life. Now, is that a good thing for the pharmaceutical companies? Yeah, right. So they're not rushing to tell you about this, are they? No. They're ignoring the common cause, which is chronic infection. Now, I'm watching time here because I've got a lot of slides.
You're fine.
Yeah, okay. Now, anyone hear about mycoplasmal infections? You guys should know about this because I'll explain why in a second. This is written by Garth Nicholson and colleagues. Garth Nicholson is a brilliant molecular biologist. He was a professor. He was in traditional medical research. He headed major labs. He wrote loads of papers. He's got his own kind of institute now Very clever guy. I'm not clever, I'm just reading from clever people, okay, so don't get confused by that one. So his summary is bacterial and viral infections are associated with several fatigue illnesses. They're actually associated with lots of stuff, including chronic fatigue syndrome, see masses of it, fibromyalgia syndrome, Gulf War illness, rheumatoid arthritis, and on and on and on. And they've looked for the presence of these pathogens, these mycoplasma infections with these patients, and they see them a lot. Okay, so let's get into that. Can I move or not? Is there am I going to be on the light? Someone's going to tell me off, I'm sure. Okay. I bet the camera is freaking out now. I'm not in the light. Are you free? She just said yes. Mycoplasmal infections are also associated with a variety of illnesses such as N. hominis, blah 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 blah, big long word, and other stuff. They penetrate. They live normally with you, but when they get into the blood and you get into other areas, they cause problems. They can cause chest infections, all sorts of stuff like that. Okay, and other illnesses which elude the normal diagnosis. They've been associated with autoimmune disease. I'm going to talk about this more in a second. And immunosuppressive. You don't want an immunosuppressive disease. I mean, that's obvious, okay? HIV and AIDS is associated with it. And other terminal illnesses as well. And importantly, it's thought to be a major source of morbidity in HIV patients. And they've actually looked at it, and they think it actually progresses the HIV. But there's no interest in tackling this particular bug, for obvious reasons, unless you meet someone like me. Also, anyone know anyone with multiple sclerosis, thyroid disease, stuff like that? Well, this bug's been majorly implemented in it. In fact, it's an infection. It's a basic infection. But can you see from one infection how all these diseases come? And all these specialists are making all their money treating all these things, yeah? Now, they're the smallest self-replicating organism known to science. Viruses are smaller, but they have to live inside the host cell, okay? They lack, which is viruses. There are hundreds of types of these things, and they're found everywhere. But only a few can be found in the blood and tissues. And not all of them are bad, which is good. And simply put, they're a parasitic bacteria. Now, this guy, who's a very clever guy, explains, once in the cell, they steal your fat. Now, some people might think that's good. Does anyone here think that's good? It's not good. Okay, fat's good for you. Fat's not bad, so ignore that nonsense. And they steal it from something called the mitochondria. Now, that's the little energy, that creates the energy, that keeps you alive. You need the mitochondria to work. If it's not working, you're going to die. When the mitochondria is shut down, that's a classic thing that happens in cancer. Okay, and that's another talk. So your battery goes down. So guess what happens? You don't have any energy. Anybody not got any energy? Tell them back. Okay. You see it all day long. They also disrupt the immune system, and they cause swelling, inflammation, and blah blah blah. And you sit there, and you've got all these horrible things going on. You haven't got a clue what it is, and no one's helping you. And there's a little bugger of an infection. Is sitting there causing a problem. And this is really interesting. After invading the host cells, they can trigger the release of reactive oxygen free radicals. You might hear these or not, don't worry. And what they do is they modify, they change your RNA, your DNA. And they eventually lead to malignant transformation. And it's been observed, they've looked at it, it only happens after 18 cell divisions, and this guy's been working on it, and they've found in certain late stage cancers, like stage 4 cancers, 90% of them are infected with this bug. Okay, and it promotes the progression of the cancer, the spread of the cancer. Do you not think they should be looking at stuff like that to treat? Are they doing it? No. Do you think they make a lot of money out of cancer treatment?
Yeah.
So his hypothesis, now he worked with ex-soldiers and actually ex-special forces soldiers as well, not as part of the military, they came to him. He said the emergence of new illnesses and an increase in the incident rate of previously described signs and symptoms are due to our toxic environment. Most of us now understand that, all the chemicals and stuff in the air, and purposeful development of and testing of weapons of mass destruction. That's a pretty bold statement for that guy to make. And what he's saying is that mycoplasma has been taken and it's been altered. And it's been altered by scientists that are involved with the military. Now, this is not my area, and I'm certainly not an expert in geopolitical stuff, but there's other people here that could probably take this up and look at this, and probably are. This is a patent from Dr. Lowe, who's the scientist he's talking about, where he describes how they took this stuff, this mycoplasma, I think it's from AIDS patients, and they manipulated it. And Professor Garth, what he's saying is that they've made it into a mass weapon. And unfortunately what's happening now is it's not just, it was injected into Gulf War veterans and all the rest of it, but now it's spreading through them to other people, and other people are getting it. And you're getting all this vast array. And that's not all. When they make these vaccines, there's other stuff that goes into them. Okay, there's large viruses that they have to make in large quantities can't survive or reproduce without being introduced into cells that nourish them, which enables them to reproduce. They have to have that, okay? So when they put them in labs, they have to grow them in and on things like monkey and kidney cells, chicken embryos, as well as other animal and human cells. And they must all be nourished with the food. And the most likely they're going to be fed by calf serum, okay, which is extracted from fecal calf blood. Now this product can carry many types of viruses, and there's even stuff we don't even know what it's got. And what happens is it gets into the vaccine, and then it gets into you, and then you have problems. Now, just a cursory examination of the literature indicates that this may be occurring. One study, revealing study, that the feces, the poo, from children under 2 years old who had gastroenteritis that could not be attributed to a recognised pathogen were examined for pestivirus antigens, meaning this stuff coming through these kind of cell lines. And they were detected in 30 of 128 episodes of gastroenteritis. That's a huge number. Huge. It was slightly different now than normal because it involved it brought on respiratory inflammation, but this last line should worry you. There are also concerns regarding a pattern of pestivirus infection in infants born with microcephaly, a condition where their head or cranial capacity is unusually small. So this stuff isn't just sci-fi, it's out there and it's doing stuff, and it's reported. But have you heard that in your newspapers? Do they warn you about that when they give you vaccines? No. One study, I couldn't believe this, finds that an alarming 75% of all laboratory cell lines examined were contaminated with pestivirus strains. Okay, there's long words to explain what they are. So, your sources of infection, each one of these you could spend 8 hours talking about. We're not going to do that, obviously. People, obviously, if you're in crowded environments, you can catch colds and catch bugs off them, we know that. Vaccines is another source. Food. People don't understand that 50% of the antibiotics made in this country go to animals. In the States, it's 75%. There used to be a practice of low dosing on antibiotics to improve the growth yield of the animal. But what that does is it creates antibiotic resistance. They've stopped it in Europe now, as far as I know, but in America I think it still goes on. So if there's antibiotic resistance in the animals and you eat that food, that can be transferred to you. Did you know that? It can be transferred to the food you eat. So why do you think you need to eat organic food? Okay, there's another reason. Flies carry antibiotic resistance, and when they regurgitate or spit or defecate onto your food, you can catch it as well. Okay, so that's important. So this is a good model for disease or profit. Now I'm just picking one little bit of vaccination and just picking one little bit of the whole story. There's many more aspects to this. You vaccinate. Mycoplasmas are in the vaccines, just to underline that. We can't guarantee it's every vaccine, and they do try to remove them, but they can be in them. So you get vaccinated, you get a mycoplasma coming to your system. It causes an autoimmune disease. It can cause various autoimmune disease. You might get Hashimoto's, which is a low thyroid disease. Low thyroid disease then is involved with depression, obesity, maybe diabetes, heart disease and cancer is involved with these things as well. Now as we're going along, can you see the income stream increasing? Yeah? Now of course mycoplasma cause infections. They call infections genital urinary infections, they call lung infections, all sorts of things. So there's more revenue there. Infections can go on and cause other things like heart disease. So then you might give some antibiotics, or you give them anyway. Antibiotics damage the gut. Classically it's called leaky gut, which allows inappropriate material to get into your system, and your immune system then gets hyperreactive to it. And also they're very clever, some of these things that get in, because they coat themselves, they look like your organs to your immune system. So then your immune system attacks them and then starts attacking your organs. So you get autoimmune disease. Then that weakens your immune system. And when you've got a weak immune system, what happens? You get more infections and you get things like cancer. And of course, with antibiotic resistance and all the superbugs, that further weakens your immune system. Can you see how this works? It's clever, isn't it? If you wanted to develop a profitable model of how to make a lot of money, here's how you might do it. This is how it works. Not only that, because they also cause inflammation and infection in the brain and other areas. So you get neurodegenerative diseases, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, all the neurobehavioural disorders. Has anyone noticed you didn't have autism and autistic stuff donkeys years ago? No. In every school now, how many of these classes do you have full of these kids? Fatigue and illness, Gulf War syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome, autoimmune disease, rheumatic disease, GI disorders, genital unit diseases, it goes on and on and on. All from this, I've just picked one thing, and there's a host of others to look at. So is there a better way? Well, we hope there's a better way. I'm just going to play you this. I'm trying to pick things that you would be aware of.
Dr. Saul, this is such a hopeful message today, for sure. You had mentioned before that vitamin C could help people with infectious diseases. Maybe we should talk about that for a few minutes as well.
Yes, there's just no question about that. The amount of vitamin C varies, though. The sicker you are, the more you need. You don't take the amount of C that you think you should need. You take the amount that works. You take the amount that gets the job done. That amount could be higher than you ever imagined. When I had viral pneumonia, and that's what happens when you don't follow the rule, I got run down and I had viral pneumonia. Now, a friend of mine was an internist. I went to see him, and he said, here's an antibiotic. And I said, wait a minute, this is viral pneumonia, you told me. He said, yes. And I said, well, antibiotics don't work against viruses. He said, no, that's for a secondary infection that might develop. There's really nothing I can give you for the virus except cough medicine and tell you to stay in bed for a couple of weeks. So I thought to myself, all right, I'll try vitamin C. After all, Dr. Cathcart and Dr. Corner were curing pneumonia with it, and I have pneumonia. This is the perfect time to find out if this will work. Well, I ended up taking 2,000 milligrams of vitamin C every 6 minutes I was awake. No, that is not something that I misspoke of. I took 2,000 milligrams of C every 6 minutes I was awake. That's 20,000 milligrams an hour. Now, I had a terrible cough, and I had a very high fever. At 20,000 milligrams an hour, 2,000 milligrams every 6 minutes, in 3 hours, my fever came down 3 degrees, and my cough stopped. Now, that is quite impressive. Here's something even more amazing. A friend of mine, who was, in fact, a healthcare provider, had a baby who was about a year old, weighed in the neighborhood of 20 pounds. Child had been sick a lot. In the first year of its life, it had had 11 full courses of antibiotics in 12 months. Generally speaking, overuse of antibiotics is a big problem in and of itself. But aside from the fact that it fosters disease-resistant strains of microorganisms, let's just look at it from the point of view of the baby. If you give antibiotics over and over again, it's not going to work. If they don't work the first couple, 3 times, it's not going to work. You can beat a dead horse all day and it's not going to get up, so just don't. What happened then was the father wondered what could be done for this child. Now, the child was very sick. It had fever, it had mucus in its throat, and its eyes were runny, its skin was red, it was coughing and sneezing, it was crying, and nobody had slept for I don't know how many nights. The child was under the care of a pediatrician. They were doing everything that you could. It wasn't working. So in our conversation, I mentioned, well, have you tried high doses of vitamin C? He said, I'll try anything. So I told him about it, and my own experiences with it. And he talked to me about the saturation. He said, well, how much? I mean, this is a baby. I said, I really don't know. Why don't you do the best you can, give the child as much C as you can, and give it enough to get better, but not so much as causes loose stool. And he said, well, how do I get into a baby? I said, well, you could get chewable C and crush them into a powder, or get liquid C, or get crystals and put it in juice, any way at all. So he worked it out, and the bottom line is this. He gave this 20-pound baby 20,000 milligrams of vitamin C. The child slept through the night, and the symptoms were better that night. High doses of vitamin C work so well for colds and flu and infectious illnesses that you would never even think of getting a flu shot ever again.
Okay, I heard a few gasps there when you said. Anyone gasp when you said those amounts? Oh, sorry. I heard a few gasps there. Yeah? I mean, they're not huge amounts, okay? They're huge amounts because you've been told that the standard adult dose of vitamin C is 400 IU a day or whatever it is, which is pathetic. When you're treating the body with vitamin C, you give, there's 2 ways of doing it. I'm going to get in a bit more detail in a second. There's a couple of ways you do it. You do it with one particular product, orally you'll do it to what's called bowel tolerance, and with the newer versions there's a different way, but I'll go on to that in a second. So I'm just trying to introduce that to you because lots of people, especially patients, come in and they're using it, but they don't use it enough. This stuff is amazing. Okay, there's so much research on it. I'm just going to pick a little bit of it today for you. This is a big, long, scary scientific paper, which we don't really have to read all that because only certain people probably can read all that and make any sense of it. But what it's describing, why I'm showing this because I'm trying to show there's research on it. Because if you go to your GP and talk about vitamin C, what's the normal response you get? It's rubbish, okay? There's a whole discussion about why they do that. That's another discussion. It isn't rubbish. It's in the literature, okay? This is a very scary diagram, okay? Does this work? Yeah. All you need to know from this is a septic insult, something in the blood that says, look, we've got an infection here. You don't want sepsis. Sepsis kills you. If you get a localized infection, generally, you can survive that. But once it gets into the blood, it will kill you. And what it does, it comes into this box here, which is a cell, which is in the body, and it starts to produce all these horrible things here, which is what we call reactive oxygen species. And then what it's trying to do is trying to kill off bugs and do all sorts of things. But it ends up causing real problems, this reaction to this septic insult. It starts to cause problems to capillary perfusion and what we call barrier function. It starts to shut down the blood flow to organs, and eventually you'll die from sepsis. Vitamin C comes in two versions. Either way, it gets converted into ascorbic acid, it starts to shut down this process. And that's why if you give stacks of it to people with infection, and I'm going to finish that story off about my friend at the end of it if we get time, is it starts to save the person. So you've got evidence there that shows it works. So if the GP says it doesn't, he needs to read the literature. This is from the same paper, another thing. Lipopolysaccharide and interferon gamma. All these are inflammatory markers from infection. This is the kind of outer surface of bugs. Stimulates this whole pathway which starts to cause problems. Vitamin C comes in various places and shuts it down. Works like a dream. But you have to give enough. The amount you're given is not enough. Another study, just pulled it up. What was the tagline of this? Is that they gave vitamin C, in competitive groups they didn't. They also gave some zinc as well. And they started to show an immune response related to giving that to certain diseases and infectious diseases. And I think there was infectious bronchitis. So there's literature showing this stuff works. Another one here, and they gave ridiculously small amounts, just over a gram, to these elderly patients. And what you saw there, so I clicked that a bit too soon. Go back to that one. Oh, did I get that? Okay, yeah, there it is there. So they had a reduction of at least 80% in the incidence of pneumonia. Isn't that phenomenal? 80%? And very little small amounts of vitamin C. I'm talking about vitamin C, A, because it's so useful, because everyone's heard of it. Okay, there's no point in bringing some exotic thing here, because you're just not going to be able to relate to it. So that's really cool. So how much is enough? This is a good site, orthomolecular.org. Okay, you'll get lots of information about stuff on this. And also, right at the beginning, there was a slide with the website we put up for this. And on that, we're going to start populating that with information, put a store on it so you can buy the stuff. So that just goes straight through to the people that sell it. And so that you can have one place to go for this information. Obviously, I'm telling you a lot of stuff. There's no way you're going to write all this down. So there is a site up. It's called drugthebug.com. Presently, it'll just say leave your email, and there's a silly little video on it. But as we go along, we'll populate that for you. And you have a look. Drugthebug.com. Drug the bug. Okay. Why have I called it drug the bug? It's easy to remember. Okay, hopefully. How much is enough? Now, on that interview, they gave their baby vitamin C about every 15 minutes, and they were giving like 2 grams of vitamin C per kilogram of body weight. Okay. Now, if you give it orally, it's the normal vitamin C. If the baby or the patient gets a loose stool, then that's the maximum dose. Okay, you don't want to go any higher than that. In fact, you probably want to cut back a little bit. Okay, so that's called D.E.B.F.M tolerance. That's a very good indicator because everyone's different. How much vitamin C you need. What about a preventative dose? Preventative dosage for an adult is about 10 to 15 grams a day. So if you're taking 2 or 3 grams, it's kind of all right, but you're not up there. It's 10 to 15 grams a day. This is based on work going back to 1920 before. They did it in hospitals. I've got the research in the hospital. Children, you give it 1 gram per year of age. So if you've got a 2-year-old child, you're going to give 2 grams a day. A 9-year-old child is going to have 9 grams a day. And you cut it off at 10 grams a day. Okay? That's a preventative dose in the child. So most of you here will probably be way under that. What about when you're ill? You take it to bowel tolerance. So you keep taking it until you get a loose stool. And you must, the half-life of vitamin C is about 30 minutes. So what you must do is you must take it in divided doses throughout the day so you keep dosing yourself up. Now there's a new kid on the block. The problem is, you can probably see from that top diagram, if you take a small dose of vitamin C, then most of it gets into you. If you take a larger dose, only a little bit gets into you. And that's not good, because it means you've got to take stacks of vitamin C to get stuff into you. So there's a new kid on the butt, and it's called liposomal vitamin C. Anybody heard of it? No? Wow, okay. What it is you put vitamins, you put your products, your vitamin C or the glutathione, well, you put it in a liposomal capsule, if you like. And what it does, it protects it, it goes straight into the system, straight into the cells, and you get incredible amounts get into you. Because if you take orally large doses, you probably get 16% in you. If you take it intravenously, you'll probably get 75%. With this stuff, you can get up to 80% in you. So it's really cool. And you can actually make it yourself, and we'll put something on the site about that. So this is the key thing. People don't understand this. Bowel tolerance doesn't work for this. Yeah? You can take stacks of this stuff. It's not going to work for this, okay? What you've got to do is you've got to take and divide doses. 1 gram of this stuff is equivalent to 3 or 5 grams of normal vitamin C. Okay? And the way you dose it is you dose it to relieve the symptoms. So when the patient starts to look better, you know you're kind of hitting the mark. All right? They don't realise people are using this stuff incorrectly. Okay? Is there anything else we can do? Homeoprophylaxis. Okay, I'm watching time here. Anybody heard of homeoprophylaxis? Okay, good. Well, that's great. Okay. It's been used for over a century to prevent disease and cure it. And there's 2 components. There's short-term and there's long-term and how you use it. Now, I'm going to rush through this. 1907, this MD here read a paper. This is by the way, it's a long time ago. And we're now talking about it now. You know, I mean, it's incredible. 107 years ago, whatever it was. And he was talking then about smallpox vaccine and all the rest of it. And they had this lovely meeting and lovely chat, and they were talking about the epidemic 5 years ago, and he says that afforded a rare opportunity to test this idea of using this kind of homeopathic prophylaxis, and I'll tell you more about it in a second. And so it was used, something made up from smallpox, okay, and it's got a lovely name there, variolinum, and all the rest of it. I asked some of my colleagues who I knew who were using this and to report their experience. I was careful to write. I trust that reference to your casebook ledger and other records will enable you to make your figures definite and exact. May I ask that any uncertain cases be omitted from your report to the end that the figures may be conservative and an understatement rather than... Now these are medics, donkeys years ago, they're still pretty accurate. Just because it's 100 years ago doesn't mean they're all going to sort of make it up. And anyway, the results they got was a 97% prevention rate. That's phenomenal. That's better than vaccination. Okay, now by the way, this is 107 years ago. Do you not think they could have told us about this by now? Listen, Big Pharma's great. They're very clever at keeping this stuff out. How does it work? Homeopathic stuff. By the way, not all homeopaths agree with homeoprophylaxis. That's a big technical and philosophical argument. But I've seen the data on it, and by God, if we're running out of antibiotics, you need someone who does this very close. This is the reason why I mentioned it to you. Effectively, you know how homeopathy works. You create a dilution, you keep diluting down, they keep succussing it and banging it, and eventually you've got hardly anything left. You've got some kind of imprint left in the water, vibrational imprint. And various scientists have been involved and they've described how it works. Highly contentious. Lots of people are saying it's rubbish. Other people are saying it's amazing. That's the usual stuff you get with all this. Okay, the great thing is, whatever it is left in this homeopathic dilution, which works, I'm going to show you a stack of evidence, is non-toxic if it's used correctly. Okay, it's not like a standard vaccine, and there's some references and all the rest of it. This is one case which is very interesting. Leptospirosis is it's an infection spread by rats. It's through water, and in Cuba. Now, the reason it's all coming out of Cuba because they weren't controlled by Big Pharma. I know that's starting to change. Other people may tell you on that. But they had some kind of storm, some kind of tornado, something, and it caused absolute chaos and flooding and loads of infection. And the government said, right, we've got this infection. They turned around to the people who make vaccines. They said, right, come on, we need a vaccine. Let's sort this out. They said, we can't do it. It's going to take too long to produce it. And in this quiet corner of this lab was a little project on homeoprophylaxis someone was doing. And whoever the leader of the country was then heard about this and said, right, we'll do that. And he said, you're joking. This is like some silly thing to do with homeopathy. He said, I don't care, scale it up and do it. So all the medical system, the GPs, the consultants, the nurses, just like over here, they were all trained how to use this stuff and they made this stuff up. And they gave it to 2.3 million people. That's a lot, isn't it? At high risk of infection. The remaining population, this was in a particular region, the remaining population were untreated. Now, within weeks, the treated province had an 84% decrease in disease incidence, while the numbers of those affected in untreated provinces continued at expected historical levels. The intervention was strongly associated with a drastic reduction of disease incidence, resulting in complete control of the epidemic. The protective effect continued into the next year with an 84% reduction in cases for the treated areas, though no further treatment had been given, and in the untreated areas it went up. Now that's phenomenal. Shouldn't that be on the front page of every newspaper? Shouldn't you be hearing about that? Do you know what it is? It's a little sugar pill. Boom, done. That's it. One dose. Okay, and they followed this. All the scientists followed it, they did all the data, and they couldn't believe it. And I've got an interview with this guy who's the head of this lab saying, I don't understand, how did this work? That was the chart, that's how the disease was rising, and then they gave the homeopathic, they just knocked it down. A year later, that little blip is other regions getting more infections, and the darker line, there's no impact at all of the treated people. The data's there, and all the rest of it. This guy's amazing. Isaac Golden, he's the one who's kind of pushing all this. And he published a study. How many people have got kids here? Yeah? Kids? Okay. He published a 15-year study. Show me a vaccine study of 15 years. You ain't going to see it, okay? Trust me on that, okay? 15 years. And, 1,100 kids given this homeoprophylaxis against all the standard stuff you vaccinated for. And the results of him doing that were, it was 90% effective against preventing disease, much higher than vaccination. The children of the study were much healthier, fewer chronic ailments, and there were no cases of injury. When you went to your GP, wouldn't you like to be given that choice? Can you believe you've never heard of this stuff? But what does the Chief Medical Officer say? It's rubbish. But I say to her, there's few new treatments on the horizon, and the situation is so grave, to quote her own book, it should be considered a civil emergency. Well, don't you think she needs to look at that stuff? Yes. How can she say it's rubbish? Incredible. And she calls these people peddlers, these doctors who do homeopathy, she calls them peddlers. I'm surprised it's still available on the NHS. It's rubbish. And they claim all this stuff, and they said it's all rubbish and blah, blah, blah. Look, there's a study. Yeah. And starting in 1799, they used it to do scarlet fever, I believe it was, or viral diseases. There's stacks of them, stacks and stacks and stacks, experimenting with stuff. 2010, they dealt with all this stuff prophylactically. It goes on. If you flip that there, I think you... Chikungunya, horrible. Sri Lanka has it, India has it. Results of the study, they use this stuff, that while over 73% contracted it elsewhere, the people who gave homeoprophylaxis, only 17% got it. Cholera, Hahnemann is in the invention of homeopathy, was prevented and cured in 1831. It just goes on. If you look at the figures, it's just incredible the amount of work that's been done on this. 1996, I think they had an infection rate of 0.125%, and the rest of the world was 40 to 50 to 80, 90%. You know, I mean, that's phenomenal. And these aren't just silly little people doing it, no disrespect to silly little people, whoever they may be. They're proper government institutions, and they're medics, and they're people who are very, very well qualified. Oh, no, there was an outbreak of dengue fever, and it reduced it by 81.5%. Another outbreak, and another blah, 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 and it goes on and on and on. And look at all this data. I make no apologies for sticking up. I know it's horrible to have to read off these things if you're at the back. There's stacks and stacks. An infection fell by 93% compared to elsewhere, fell by 71%, but elsewhere it went up by 273%, went up by 315%, and on. And on. 2010, look at this data. India distributed 2.5 million people. They've got so much data, 30 camps distributing this stuff. Can you imagine in England, them doing that here? This one actually said that these things were among the best preventive medicines for the disease. Now these are countries where they have huge amounts of disease, you know, that can kill people, okay? Diphtheria, they tested it in the lab, they gave this stuff, it raised antibodies which proved it worked. This has all been ignored. hepatitis. People had hepatitis or in contact with people with hepatitis, they gave this stuff, no one contracted it, and they were in close contact. Okay? Influenza, respiratory tract infections, it just goes on. Stacks of it. Stacks of it and stacks of it and stacks of it. It goes on. Japanese encephalitis. There are decades in India, thousands of people infected, like over 600 deaths, loads of children dying. They brought this stuff in, and it absolutely reduced it. Okay, it reduced it way, way down to nil by 2003. But they gave it to 20 million children under the age of 15. These are huge studies, huge. So we had leptospirosis up there, we did that. We had malaria, we did that. Oh, that's a new one, malaria. Meningococcal disease, meningitis. Look at this one. It's about 95% effective against these diseases. Yeah? And not just when you vaccinate, you've only got the one thing. This covers all the different strains and different versions of it. Poliomyelitis. Gave it to look, in 1800s, this doctor in Chicago gave prophylactic treatment to 5,000 children. None of them got polio. Now you can argue about polio and all the rest of it, that's another discussion. People came into direct contact, didn't get it. In another study, 6,000 children would give it, no one got it. No one got it. Scarlet fever, smallpox, whooping cough. Look at this lady, Dr. Dorothy Shepherd, in 1967, okay, provides several accounts of whooping cough prophylaxis by pertussin. It's one of these treatments called pertussin. She said, personally, I've always used it for years in whooping cough, and because someone else recommended it, and it's given me 100% protection, even though it raised a particular area, and all the children were given it, and they did very well on it. Okay, so there's all that, and there's references, all references, literature and references, and references and references. That was compiled by a homeopathic Fran Sheffield, and here she is. This is the person that's in charge of your health, and she's in charge of your children's health. And according to her, homeopathy is rubbish.
Is what she's saying criminal?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
If she has access to that information and she's deliberately lying about it, that's got to be criminal.
well, you're the experts. You're the kind of geopolitical people. You kind of need to. I'll give you this information. But,
She's lost in part too, isn't she?
well, absolutely. Now look. This is from her book. A few years later, shortly after Josh joined primary school, the government passed new laws making it a criminal offence to be infected in public. There were talk of random tests in the streets. So that's definitely one silver lining. We've given you vitamin C and homeopathic prophylaxis. Simple, big things to remember 10 years down the line. Anybody heard of colloidal silver?
Yes.
Why am I picking these things?
Don't know.
You don't know, because you've heard of them and they work. Big long study, big long stuff. What's it saying? It works in a particular way. It drills down to this. Silver's been used for donkey's years. Most of you know the history of it, so I don't need to get into that. Many forms of bacteria, virus and fungus utilise specific enzymes for their metabolism. Yeah? So what silver does, it disrupts that. It disables those enzymes, it kills the bugs. That's it. Nice and simple. There's other mechanisms that have been suggested to do what's called DNA association. You can read that if you want. Now this is a story about Uppy. This is a particular product that's been used that clinicians like myself use. It's you can spray it. You can spray it in the eye. It doesn't harm normal tissue, but it kills bugs. This dog, reference day 1, is a 4-year-old French poodle. I only said poople. 4-year-old French poodle. And the vet's diagnosed with a serious infectious disease, necrosis, spreading rapidly. I'm not sure if it was necrotizing fasciitis or something like that, but pretty serious. And what happens is the skin comes off, yeah, and it's horrible. Day 7, he was into kidney failure. Day 22, he had surgery, they removed most of the necrotic tissue. He was comatose and he was dying. Now treatment with this silver product began, topically and orally. Now you have to use lots of it. When you get this stuff and it says use so many sprays, forget it. You've got to use ounces and ounces of this stuff. So they poured stuff over him, they gave it to him orally. That's day 22. The kidneys became fully functional within hours of the first dose given. Right? And he also regained consciousness. That's phenomenal. I mean, this dog is dying. Like, they gave him this silver product, okay? Day 55, dramatic new tissue growth had occurred, about 30 days from surgery, no scars, no infections, and the fur cells have also fully regenerated. I'm not trying to do a thing with a dog story. It was there all along, trust me. Although it's worked, so hey, it must be unconscious. Day 90, all systems go, it's back to normal. Just a small amount of healing remains there. Now, she's only 70 days from drastic surgery. Now, the author of this has said, can you imagine this being used in burn centres and surgical and wound centres used properly? But guess what? This stuff, you can't really patent this stuff. So the drug companies can't really get involved in it. And they say, you can easily produce this and demonstrate this stuff. Now, by the way, just to let you know, it destroys more than 650 microbe types and virus, Lyme disease, M.S.c, all that kind of stuff and more. It's pretty cool. It's been shown and demonstrated to do that. I'm watching time. How am I doing for time?
5 minutes.
Oh my God, okay. So, silver, vitamin C, homeoprophylaxis. Star Trek medicine. Everyone's heard about Royal Rife, energy medicine. Well, there's a modern day Royal Rife called Dr. Konoplov, okay? And he's a Russian. All this stuff is coming out of Russia, and very, very clever. And it's using energy medicine. Effectively, what is it? It's called bioresonance, okay? I'm going to try and make the fast version. There's one of the machines, and you can read that if you want. But basically, bacteria and viruses and all that, they've all got a kind of resonance frequency, and if you can detect that in the body, you can invert the signal back to them, you can kill them, okay? And these machines do that. They do it very, very well. Let me rush through that. I was going to show you bugs being killed. Let's look at some of the research. In Russia, they looked at some patients, and it was 33 patients with all these horrible things, and they treated them, and overall health improved by 75%, and the overall general effectiveness of the treatment was 97%. They went into, it was a gynae, sorry about that picture, it's a gynae, 100 women were examined, and they had all these horrible infections, and they used device only, which is the energy device plus meds and that. Device only, there was an 85% clear up effectiveness. Literally just plug it, you're holding a thing, it's putting a signal into you. Cleared the infections, looked tad high with the meds. The meds, do you see how the meds were lagging it? Yeah? Another one, they were treating children, various things, and blah, 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 and there was massive improvement. The first figures are using the machine, the one with the meds. Every area they've looked at is pretty much, it's kind of trounced the meds. Parasitic infections in kids, meds only just 48% clear up, the device was 86%, put them both together, it was higher. And by the way, you can do this at home. You take this machine at home, and they retail these machines around about 300 quid. I mean, this is the really clever thing. They've brought this stuff in. It's portable, and it's relatively affordable.
Is this device the modern version of the Rife machine?
Correct, yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, what was the device?
Yeah, I have to be careful about advertising, but if you go to the site, you can find all the information. Okay, we're populating. Okay, so load of stuff. 1,500 people treated, blah, 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 loads of stuff. Okay, look, there's loads of studies in there. I'm showing you studies after study. This stuff, basically this device in hospitals, military Russian hospitals, proper hospitals, the national hospitals in Russia, thousands of people, and they're working really, really well with this stuff. There's a lot more to talk about that, but I don't have any time, so I'm just going to try and click through that. Loads of infections, loads of data. We like data. Data's good. And they even worked on resistant tuberculosis and chest infections, and there's just conclusion and loads of rest of it. Okay, so what's next? Reduce the load, clear yourself out, try and get a good naturopath, get someone who knows how to detox you. Remember vitamin C, dose to bowel tolerance if it's orally. If it's the new stuff, the liposomal stuff, you can't do that. 1 gram of that is equivalent to 3 or 5 grams of the normal vitamin C. Homeoprophylaxis, try and find a homeopath that does that work. If you go onto the site, we'll probably list a lot of these people. And we have Star Trek medicine. Don't forget to wash your hands. Sleep's important. Be in bed asleep before 10:30. Yeah? Because your immune system revs up then. And if you're not asleep, it gets shut down and you don't clear yourself out. There's a whole lot of other stuff to that. And organic food. Now, to end that story of my friend, who was in Indonesia, who for 2 weeks had been on the floor, raging. Apparently he was so hot he felt cold as well. They put towels on him and they couldn't pick the towels off him because the towels were so hot. I mean, I don't know how hot that is, but that's hot. Okay, very tough guy, and he was dying for 2 weeks. And what do you think after all this? What do you think I did? What do you think I said to a doctor in Indonesia? What's the quickest thing I could think of? Vitamin C. I found a spa that did intravenous vitamin C, not for treatment, because you can't say you treat, blah, blah, blah. And I emailed this guy. In 30 minutes, this doc got back. I said, look, I've no idea what he's got. He's dying, that's all I know. Would you please do it? So they dragged my friend in. They carried him into this guy's place, this kind of spa place the next day. They put him on the bed. And the guy said, okay, don't worry, you're going to be okay. So he just put the drip in. He put intravenous vitamin C and glutathione. In 45 minutes, he got up, he walked out, he had a full English breakfast. I can see someone coming from the side. I think my time is up. By the way, one thing, I'm not claiming to treat anything. All the disclaimers, don't change any medicine. Only take advice from properly qualified people and all the rest of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.